find any kind of grant funding that would help with this, but I'm just putting it out there that it's really unlikely that we're going to be able to get that any benefit of that. So because of that, I asked Mr. Victor, okay, if the city was to provide some input or some funding toward this project, would you be willing to do the same deal with city funding, where Mr. Victor, for his properties, would forego the benefit of any of the extra city funding and let that benefit go to the other property owners in the neighborhood? And Mr. Victor graciously agreed to that. So one of the things that you'll see on this spreadsheet is that the calculation, and actually it says private party contribution, but it really should say city party contribution. It's kind of a light orange section. That column shows a 20%, the city covering 20% of the cost for all of the properties that are not owned by Northern Investments, which is Mr. Victor's company. And so you can see in that column there's adjustments that bring the cost down for those properties. And that makes them much more, it brings them much more in a reasonable cost. It's still quite high. For most folks, it's a lot of money to think about spending, but we also have to keep in mind that this is something that's going to be spent over a 20-year period with the financing. So that's kind of where we are, and for each of these properties, it shows these costs and what their likely payment would likely be, a monthly payment on a 20-year amortization. So that's what we have worked out. The purpose of this meeting mainly is to kind of present this information to you, but also we kind of labeled it an open house because we want people to feel comfortable having one-on-one discussions, bringing up their concerns, and talking about what we can do to tweak things with this calculation, how we can address the concerns that people have. So I don't know how many people do we have online? Still just the two? Just
Brandon and one other.
And one caller. So I don't know. We have someone on the phone. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to see much that we have here, but if the phone caller wants to chime in with any questions, you're more than welcome to. And then here in the council chambers, we can open it up to any questions that any of you might have, whether it's, feel free to ask whether it's a particular property or whether it's just understanding better how the calculation was made. We're happy to take any questions and help you through it. We have bigger sized maps up here that you can feel free to take a look at, and we have copies of the maps for you to take and a copy of the spreadsheet for you to look at the calculations. But that's the main thing we're trying to do here. So feel free to chime in. Anything that you want to ask or understand better, we're here to help. And as Ray said, these are not set in stone. These are all just our best efforts to get to where we are right now. And really, there's all sorts of options on the table when it comes to adjusting this. So we want to do our best to serve the needs of the neighborhood, and the only way to do that is by listening to the folks who live in the neighborhood. So please let us know what you think.
If I may, I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Okay. Douglas Huffman. I'm at 2018th Avenue. I tried the Teams thing and it's not working for me. It says you guys haven't answered, but neither here nor there. On the latest letter that we got, of course, it included the maps of the lids, but no spreadsheet. For my property, 2018, can you give me the total and then the 3% monthly cost?
Yes.
That you talked about?
Yes, I can. And you probably couldn't get into Teams because we didn't have it up at first, and it should be working now. But that's neither here nor there. So your property, hold on, the print unfortunately is very small still on these things.
It's number 6.
Yes. It was Hethman, right? Douglas Hethman, 2018?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So the your property would only be the street improvements because you already have water. And the
Yes.
street improvements, the total for your property without any discount by the city is $10,780 and 38 cents. If the city were to put in 20%, that would bring it down to $8,624.30. And then if you finance that over a 20-year period, you're looking at a monthly payment of around, let's see, $47.83.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I have something I wanted to point out too.
Sure.
So most all the people that are currently, I need you up there.
Yeah, we need a microphone on you, sorry.
Most all the people that are currently paying sewer bills down there pay roughly around $90 a month for sewer, I think is what it is per unit. Well, on most of the places that I've added water to, the sewer bill drops because it's based on consumption that way.
Mhm.
So you end up saving between, $45 or $50 a month in sewer costs. So just something to think about if you're thinking about, paying this extra fee, you are saving that extra fee on top of it anyway, so you can put that towards it. So.
That is a good point. It's difficult to quantify what that is because there's lots of factors that go into your utility bill.
Yeah.
But typically, yes, if you have a water meter and you have water service, you are going to be looking at a lower amount for your sewer portion.
Blair, if I could.
What about us
expand
that do not need water and do not need anything, but we're still getting water because it's part of the thing, because we need to be able to reach the neighbor over there. That was where I fall in. I don't need it. I
Right.
have a good well.
Mm-hmm. So that's certainly a concern. I'm not sure I have an answer that'll make you feel any better. Unfortunately, when it comes to utility infrastructure like this, picking and choosing, skipping over properties and picking and choosing makes it rather difficult to get it to pencil out. But the good thing, the thing with wells is that you do have that uncertainty of whether you'll need to have anything done to your well in the future.
I understand, but if I was to get a well replacement, that could be anywhere between $20,000, $25,000, and this is a lot more than what I would be paying for that. That would be a one-time thing, until the well give out again, without any monthly payments, and this is going to add a monthly bill to that.
Right.
So for me, it's not a benefit.
Okay. So I guess one thing I'd like to ask, do you see, if depending on what the cost, if the costs were lower, is there a benefit to you? Is there some point where water service is attractive to you, or is it something that you just don't ever see yourself using?
If it was to be like, at first it was 44, now it's 30.
Looks like with the assistance from the city, it's 30.
1870, so I think it's now 35.
35.6, yeah.
Yeah. So if it was like around 20, I'd say, okay, fine, I'll leave those 20 grand, I'll figure it out, help my neighbors. But this is a lot of money. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a fancy car. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. No, I understand.
Someone that doesn't need it.
What about the street improvements? Because the water portion of this for you is
My understanding is that the
10,000.
street improvement is only for the street across.
so if you look at the map, let's see, the one that has the green border on it, the sidewalk, there would be a sidewalk that would come up to the corner of your property, and then it would cross the street and go up the other side. And so there is, and Joe, besides sidewalk, would there be any asphalt improvements on 18th there as well? Like overlay or anything like that?
Some, possibly, and there's also the, an access platform around the mailbox, the game mailbox that sits right there in the grass.
So that's on my property, you know?
Yeah.
Right. So there would be sidewalk up to that point,
Yeah.
and then it would cross, and then there would also be paving on the street itself. And that's one thing we tried to your properties is one of those that is discounted based on the fact that there isn't a sidewalk going the full distance along the street.
That it's not really needed, that's that big old ditch in the front, you know, for the water and for the drainage. I mean,
Okay.
I don't need a sidewalk.
Okay.
I know that you guys are putting it on there. I like my property the way it is.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, the sidewalk in front of your property would be opposite, on the other side of the street.
Right, it would be for the neighbors across the street.
Yeah.
Okay. That's, you know, it's probably something that I'm not sure that we can, if you don't want any improvements to your property at all, there's,
I mean,
We-
like I said, if you're just, the water, that's fine, you
Mhm.
know? Fine, if it's only $10,000 for the water, that's fine, you know, we'll take care of it. But the sidewalk is not gonna be on my side of the property, so I should not be charged for that.
right, and you're not. The way that we have it set up is you would still be charged some for the street, and then there would be a smaller amount that your property would be charged for the sidewalk across the street, because it's assumed that even though there's not a sidewalk right in front, that having that pedestrian option in the neighborhood is helpful, and having that connection to other parts of the city. That this sidewalk is intended to connect to other sidewalks that eventually get you to Main Street or other places, and so that's the reason why even those that don't have a sidewalk right in front of their property are still charged some for the sidewalk, in that there is some utility that the property gets from that.
Okay, so I'm looking at here, and it says here, water line project cost, that's the very first line,
Right.
and so that would be 21,000, right?
Right, but then the next two columns apply to you, because you have a large property that wouldn't be charged half of that unless you subdivided, unless you partitioned it and sold off unless there was another house basically added to the property.
So I wouldn't be charged that until I
So-
sold it.
Until it was either divided, or it's 20 years down the road.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about those other 20,000.
So the line that you'd be looking at for your property, the total for the water would be 10,581, and then the total for the street would be
4680.
yes, 4,689. Hold on a
For
second, Joe.
2009 18th Avenue?
Yes, hold on.
Yeah.
So
see the-
I think we might have a problem with the spreadsheet then, Joe, because there's a total then at 44,810.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the total. So it should be actually more like half that.
Right.
So 22. Wow, and the 10% didn't come through on that. Sorry, we must have some issues with our spreadsheet here. I apologize. This has been rather complicated. We've had a lot of adjustments that we've been trying to make. So that 35,000 is not correct on yours. Let me take a look at the electronic copy here that I've got.
Brandon said he can send him a spreadsheet.
Tell Brandon he can. I won't say it because this is public meeting.
speak with him tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
He's smiling at you now.
Uh-huh.
Just trying to help Blair.
Uh-huh. Thanks, man. Yeah, so my calculations put it more along the lines of 12,000, 12.2, unless you were to subdivide, and then
That is more
you basically,
That is,
right. I mean, but keep in mind that those other costs are kind of deferred, because suppose you decided you wanted to move somewhere else and you sold your property. Your property is large enough that it could be divided, and you could have basically 3 more houses.
Yeah.
It could be divided into 4 parts, and 3 more houses could be built on that property.
Actually, like 8.
Well, depends on how many you want to squeeze in, but yeah, but we kind of assume that you could get at least 3 more houses on there. And so the bind that we find ourselves in is, okay, do we just charge you for the 1 house and treat you like a smaller property? And that would be fair for you right now because you have no intention of doing anything. But then if you change your mind and you divide it up, then it's a windfall to you, because those other houses would be benefiting off of the water service and the sewer and the street and all that.
yeah.
And so the intent here is, okay, well, let's defer that either to the time when you would divide up the property, or let's defer it 20 years down the road. And even at the 20-year period, the way it could work is you could choose at that point, well, you could just let it go on as a lien on the property, and it wouldn't be paid back until you sold the property. It is a way for that to happen. So you could defer that until the property is sold, essentially. So the costs, so those costs don't actually go away. They're mainly just
They're still
deferred.
there.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the only thing that has come down is gonna be the 8,000.
So these numbers aren't quite right. So if assuming the city participates in a 20% amount, then it would be 12,216, and that would be amortized over a 20-year period, and so your monthly would be more along the lines of $65 a month, that it would come to.
But in 20 years, whether I do anything with that property or not, there'll be another 20,000 added on.
Yes, at the end of that 20-year period, yes. Any other questions or thoughts? Or
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is the black the proposed sidewalks?
the black dashed line, yes, is where the sidewalks would be.
So why is it that the sidewalk like jumps across the street at Vine Street?
So right now, the south of Tamarack, the sidewalk is on the west side of the street.
Yeah.
And then
Is that the only reason though, basically?
well, there's a couple different factors. One is you want to make sure there's a sidewalk to somewhere, and so having a connection to other sidewalks is important. But and Joe might be able to explain this. There were actually some geological factors that come into play here as well.
That's right there on the side.
Yeah, and so it was felt best to continue it on the west side up until you get to Vine, and then it would cross over, because you're going to have to cross over at some point.
Yeah, it just seems like if it was, you're walking down a street, the cross should be at the intersection versus right in the middle of the street.
Well, it is an intersection. It's a T intersection.
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
And this way, by getting to that corner of Ms. Espinosa's property, by getting to that corner, it gets sidewalk access to that bank of mailboxes, and so that's thought to be an amenity to the neighborhood.
And north of there, down to the river, there's no access point at all.
yeah,
The 6-foot high fence there along Tamarack Ridge, mobile home park there's no gate, no access.
yeah, that's why it didn't seem like that would be the side to put the sidewalk on.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you're walking right next to a fence versus open houses or open fields.
Right.
Right. It adds more complexity and some cost to go down the side where the houses are, but that's the side where the people are.
Yeah, and this is like we said, this is not set in stone. It's certainly an option to switch it over.
I would like
still.
to see it on the other side if at all possible.
We can look at what the cost would be of that and how effective that it would be.
So have they actually voted on whether or not they're going to go ahead and go with this project, or are they still in the thought process?
So the directive from the council at the last public hearing was for staff to go back and try to trim down the costs and adjust the formulas and then bring it back to the council. And one of the reasons why we planned this meeting tonight, and then there's going to be another meeting that essentially is the same kind of meeting on the 29th. The reason we had those was basically to get input from residents before we go back to the council. But also we invited the council to these meetings as well, so that they could ask questions and we could get hopefully everybody's concerns worked out before we have another public hearing. But after these open houses that we're having, and it goes back to a public hearing in front of the council, then it's up to the council to determine whether they want to move ahead with the local improvement district or direct staff again to do something different. So for the next meeting at the 29th, we'll definitely tighten up and fix some of these errors that we're finding on our calculations, but we don't intend on having any drastically changed because the reason to have two different meetings was to give residents an option of more than one meeting to go to in case they have to work Tuesday nights or something like that. So, but we are open to any changes that anybody has to suggest.
Other than the sidewalk.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that being said, are there any other concerns about the infrastructure? I mean, if you set aside costs for a second, what are there any concerns about what's being proposed when it comes to, or any other concerns about sidewalk or what streets would be paved and how and so forth?
One more thing, down 19th Street, would that sidewalk just stop there, or would it go all the way to the end of the street?
Excuse me. It would end at the portion there by
1907?
Yeah, 1907. Because down to the other end, there's probably another 100 feet to the dead end length there.
Well, could it end at like 1901 and just come like that extra little distance there to where it would kind of feed that house too?
Right.
Possibly.
There's a trade-off there.
I could take the cost on that even if it was being done. I'd take it onto my lot without whatever. But it'd be nice if it came just to the house that was at the end there, to where if I am going to be paying an assessment on that property, I would like Might as well have a sidewalk like this.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we can look at that too.
Yeah.
But other than that,
Blair, do these improvements increase the value of the property owner's parcel? Are they aware of that and how much it would increase their value to make it more sellable?
So when it comes to the actual amount of what the value would be, it's really difficult to put a finger on that. We're not good at predicting that. But if you look at, so sorry for those who are listening and for the recording, are we recording this?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
We're late, but we're recording.
For the recording's sake, the question was if folks know or it's been communicated what value how this would affect the value of the properties and the ability to sell properties in the future. And so I'm not sure what residents understand or know. I'm not a very good expert on that. However, what we're not able to communicate that there's or guarantee that there's a certain value they'd get. What we can say is that based on home sales and what realtors tell us about what homes are in demand, typically if there is a better street, if there is sidewalk access to your home, especially, and also if you get water, if you don't have to worry about maintaining a well, that does reflect in the price of a home because those homes are more in demand, so that the homeowner doesn't have to worry about that in the future. Speaking personally, I'd be more likely to buy a house that was on an improved street and I didn't have to have a well to worry about. But that's me. I mean, there could be plenty of people that are looking for a well that they have control over, but the majority of people seem to appreciate the improvements, and that tends to reflect in the price.
Well, like I said, the water I can understand. You know what I'm saying? And then I can understand that. I just don't understand why I should pay for making the sidewalk, my neighbor's sidewalk, look pretty.
Well, and the sidewalk isn't about looking.
And it doesn't matter. It's not really, to me, it's not going to benefit me. It's across the street. It's improving the aesthetics of the property. Yes, I can understand that. It's not on my side. It's not touching my property except in that one little corner, but I'm getting charged for it.
Well, you're not getting charged as much as somebody who has a sidewalk right in front of their house. So
right. But I have no sidewalk in front of my house, but I'm still getting charged for some.
For a partial amount, yes. But what I'm saying is there is, if I live on a street that only has sidewalk on one side and I choose to go for a walk, then it's just a simple matter of me crossing my street and I can get to a sidewalk and walk safely on that sidewalk. Just because it's not in front of my house doesn't negate the fact that I get some benefit. Now it's definitely not as much as my neighbor gets that lives across the street. Mm-hmm. But we're trying to reflect that. And so I guess that's one thing that that we could look into, is that we're assuming a certain level of value that a sidewalk would bring. And I think when Joe and I were talking about it, we were kind of trying to imagine, if I'm buying a house, how much more would I pay for a house, or how much value would I place on that sidewalk being in front of my house as opposed to being across the street from my house? And reasonable minds can differ on this. We're not saying that we're definitely right, but we tried to make some assumptions to make this work. And we have no problem revising those assumptions if that's what people want. And so the question is, what value does someone place on having a sidewalk across the street from their house? In our discussions, we kind of said, well, I think 25% is about right. That I think that I get about 25% of the value, and my neighbor gets 100% of the value because they have a sidewalk directly in front of my house. That was just kind of the basis of our discussion that we tried to encapsulate in this formula. But reasonable minds can differ. So I guess I would ask you, what value do you think, is there any value that a sidewalk across the street from your house has for you, or for your children, or for anyone who visits you?
Anyone that walks on the street, up and down the street, there's a lot of people walking.
There is a lot of people walking up and down that street.
Right. And maybe you personally don't do that, but if someone were to say you had a visitor, or you had somebody move in with you or something like that who does walk around the neighborhood a lot, what value do you think is reasonable for having that sidewalk across the street from your house as opposed to no sidewalk at all?
To be honest with you, I never gave it any thought because I moved into that neighborhood the way it is, and I was perfectly happy with the way it is. So I never really thought about that, to be completely honest with you.
And that's not unusual.
Mhm.
That's fine. But I guess it would help us if you think about it now, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but if you come up with something, let us know, and we can see about adjusting things.
Okay. So as far as this loan works, is this going to be a city loan that we will be paying back to the city? Or will this be personal loans that we need to take out on our own?
No, not personal loans. So the bond, the city would go out for a bond to pay for this, and it would basically be using the city's credit, the city's creditworthiness, and it would be backed by, people who sell bonds. They want to know what it's backed by, right? And so we have a system in place with property taxes, and we have the ability to get those payments back, get that money paid back over time. And so the city utilizes its ability to do that. And because we're a city, and because it's a group of people, and there's a mechanism in place to collect those payments, it means it's lower risk for the people selling the bond. And so we typically can get a much lower interest rate than any individual person could get. And so, no, it's not your personal loan. It's essentially the city taking that loan, but you're going to be assessed your
I will owe my portion to the city.
Yes.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, I believe it's typically done through the property tax bills or a similar system. Is that
Yeah.
No,
correct? Is that, Brandon? I should be asking you. You're
no.
on the line.
Yeah, we wouldn't be doing this one through property tax bills. This would be through our office, through the finance office and special assessments, much like we do with sewer SDCs and water SDCs. We'd run it in-house.
Okay, so I stand corrected. Thank you, Brandon. Yeah, we would be billing you basically. The city would.
Okay.
So does anybody else from online?
Somebody at Douglas has
Gentlemen.
his hand raised.
So I do have one more question. So the 20,000 that would be deferred, like let's say the other half that's deferred, at the 20-year period time, is that all come due like a balloon payment, or does it come due now on the payment options, or is that?
That's a good question. That's something that we haven't really worked out exactly how it would work.
Because that would be a very large balloon payment.
Oh, of course, yes. Right. It's one of those things where if it's not paid, it would go as a lien on the property. And we can look at what options there would be. The intent with the city is not to harm anyone, is not to drive anyone out of their home. We certainly would try to be as flexible as the law allows. But I don't know for sure exactly how that would be handled.
Because I'm thinking it's just, I'll be like 70-something, 80-something, for a big old.
Right. No, but if suppose before that period you chose to partition your property and sell off part of it for somebody to build a house on, in that case, the appropriate amount for that portion would come due basically at closing. It would be kind of a lump sum because it would be assumed that whoever's buying that house would be either they'd be paying cash and having a large amount that will all be paid at once, or it'd be financed or something, and so that would all come at once. At the 20-year period, I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but we could look into that as well.
That would be nice. I'd like to have that answer before we know.
Let me take a note.
Something that I would say suggested 5, 10, 15-year incremental period that something could be laid out in the ordinance, have a smaller balloon payment or some other financial mechanism. The options are
We do have a comment online from Mr. Heffman. It is, will I see this in my water bill or a separate bill from the city? Brandon, if you're still listening, is that would be a separate bill, correct?
Correct. We would send out notices usually twice a year. And it really depends on how these assessments are set up, to be honest. But at a minimum, we would likely send out a notice twice a year to say, here's the balance and the payment due for the year. Again, some of that would depend on how this is structured specifically, but you would get a separate notice outside of your utility bill.
Thank you.
So let's say that you get ahead and you pay off your portion of it. Can you just continue making payments to pay off the other leftover balloon payment, the other half, or how?
I'm sure we could be flexible with that, and I don't think anybody would give you any trouble for paying more on your.
Well, you know what I'm saying. So
Right.
that if I do decide, hey, I'm 80 something and I want to give this to my kid, I don't want to leave him with a, $20,000 bill on top of that.
That's understandable. Yeah.
Blair, if I might.
Go ahead.
So yes, certainly there would be no prepayment penalties for anybody who wanted to do that. And again, that's something that I don't think this one applies, but I was going to go down the road of if the house were to sell, then it would be taken care of at that point as well. But if you're leaving it to a family member, then yeah, whatever's left over would certainly transfer to them. But there wouldn't be any prepayment penalties in this case.
Okay.
Well, you know what they say, land is everlasting.
What's that?
Land is everlasting.
Yes, it is. And that's one of the things about this about improvements like this is that it does have a long-term effect both on the property itself, but also on the enjoyment of the property and on the property values. And so when we initially met with the reviewers who reviewed the formula at first, one of the comments that came out of some of those meetings was talking about the values, the property values in the area, and that because the property values are so low, it doesn't justify putting in this much money. And I think in some ways that's a little bit backwards, because the reason property has value is not just because certain people decide to live there. It's because of the improvements that have been made in the neighborhood and to the property. And so just because a neighborhood may not have high property values doesn't mean that neighborhood doesn't deserve to have improvements and good water service, good streets, good sidewalks. Because those things, so at some point, if you want anything to improve, at some point you have to make those investments. And they do have an effect and do improve the quality of life for individuals.
So for those of us that have wells, and we would like to keep our wells, let's say that my well fails and I'm paying for this water service, not because I wanted it, but because it's something that's going to pass and it's my bill, whether I, opt for it or not. Am I still able to get my well fixed or redug deeper or do whatever I need to? Or is that going to be an issue because now there's water to that property? So
the city itself does not regulate wells. Usually that's more of a state issue. And so if we have properties in town that have wells, but also have water service to their house.
I just want to make sure that,
so you could certainly make that choice and say, no, I'm going to continue to use my well. Or you could do a hybrid and say, I'm going to use my well for my house, or I'm going to use city water for my house, and I'm going to use my well for my garden and for my yard, which I think is a really great idea, and would save you a good amount.
Yeah, because
you don't need potable water to water your plants. But that certainly is flexible and kind of up to you. Now, that being said, we have no control over future government actions when it comes to the state regulating water quality. I know that there are several areas in town, including this one, that have had issues with water quality in some of the wells, and so the state has stepped in and said, no, you can't use these wells for human consumption. They are, I think, arsenic or whatever. There's different things in the water that they are worried about, and so laws have been passed preventing people from continuing to use their wells, and pushing them to connect to city water. That could, for all we know, that could happen in the future. And so we can't make any guarantees that you would definitely be able to use your well. But for if things continue the way they are right now, then certainly.
Okay.
Mr. Heathman, is that how you say it? Hethman? Did you have any additional questions?
I do not, thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we'll probably go ahead and end this meeting. But we thank you for attending and for your input. Please feel free to continue to give us input, and we can see about modifications to this. And please also share with your neighbors that there's one more meeting just like this planned for the 29th. And we want to hear from everyone, because I'm sure I know that there's, with the notices that were sent out for the public hearing in February, and then for the letters that I sent out for this meeting, I know there were at least a couple that were returned, and so we want to make sure that people are aware, because we only have, sometimes we don't have all the information about how to get a hold of people. So we appreciate whatever assistance you can give us.
I would encourage, well, I guess the two of you to be here at that next meeting as well. We will endeavor to have the spreadsheet all corrected and double checked at that point in time. So we all are a little more solid in what we're talking about for numbers. It would be great to have more people in the room to have this discussion. Mr. Heathman, I would share that with you as well. We'd love to have you at the next meeting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, Brandon.
No problem.